Section 8 of The Adventures of Chatterer the Red Squirrel by Thornton W. Burgess. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Jude Summers. Section 8. Tommy Tit makes good his boast, and Chatterer grows very, very bold. Chapter 22. Tommy Tit makes good his boast. A-dee-dee-dee, chickadee, see me, see me. Tommy Tit the chickadee kept saying this over and over as he flew from the Green Forest up through the old orchard on his way to Farmer Brown's dooryard, and his voice was merry. In fact, his voice was the merriest, cheeriest sound to be heard that bright, snapping cold morning. To be sure, there were other voices, but they were not merry, nor were they cheery. There was the voice of Sammy Jay, but it sounded peevish and discontented. And there was the voice of Blacky the Crow, but it sounded harsh and unpleasant. And there was the voice of Chatterer the Red Squirrel, but Chatterer was scolding, just from habit, and his voice was not pleasant to hear. So everyone who heard Tommy Tit's cheery voice that cold winter morning just had to smile. Yes, sir, they just had to smile. Even Sammy Jay and Blacky the Crow. They just couldn't help themselves. When Tommy reached the stone wall that separated the old orchard from Farmer Brown's dooryard, his sharp eyes were not long in finding Peter Rabbit, and Happy Jack the Gray Squirrel, and Chatterer hiding in the old wall, where they could peep out and see all that happened in Farmer Brown's dooryard. Looking back through the old orchard, he saw what looked like a little bit of the blue, blue sky flitting silently from tree to tree. It was Sammy Jay. Over in the very top of a tall maple tree, a long way off, was a spot of black. Tommy didn't need to be told that it was Blacky the Crow, who didn't dare come any nearer. Tommy fairly bubbled over with joy. He knew what it all meant. He knew that Peter Rabbit and Happy Jack and Chatterer and Sammy Jay and Blacky the Crow had come to see him make good his boast to Chatterer that he would eat from the hand of Farmer Brown's boy, and that not one of them really believed that he would do it. He tickled all over and cut up all sorts of capers just for pure joy. Finally, he flew over to the maple tree that grows close by Farmer Brown's house. "A-dee-dee-dee, chickadee, see me," called Tommy Tit, and his voice sounded cheerier than ever and merrier than ever. Then the door of Farmer Brown's house opened, and out stepped Farmer Brown's boy and looked up at Tommy Tit, and the look in his eyes was gentle and good to see. He pursed up his lips, and from them came the softest, sweetest whistle, and it sounded like Phoebe. Peter Rabbit pinched himself to be sure that he was awake, for it was Tommy Tit's own love note, and if Peter had not looked straight at Farmer Brown's boy, he would have been sure it was Tommy himself who had whistled. "Phoebe," whistled Farmer Brown's boy again. "Phoebe," replied Tommy Tit, and it was hard to say which whistle was the softest and sweetest. "Phoebe," whistled Farmer Brown's boy once more, and held out his hand. In it was a cracked hickory nut. "A-dee-dee-dee, see me," cried Tommy Tit, and flitted down from the maple tree right on to the hand of Farmer Brown's boy, and his bright little eyes twinkled merrily as he helped himself to a bit of nut meat. Peter Rabbit looked at Happy Jack, and Happy Jack looked at Chatterer, and all three acted as if they couldn't believe their own eyes. Then they looked back at Farmer Brown's boy, and there on his head sat Tommy Tit. "A-dee-dee-dee, chickadee, see me," called Tommy Tit, and his voice was merrier than ever, for he had made good his boast. Chapter 23. Chatterer grows very, very bold. "I'm not afraid. I am afraid. I'm not afraid. I am afraid. I'm not afraid." Chatterer kept saying these two things over and over and over again to himself. You see, he really was afraid, and he was trying to make himself believe that he wasn't afraid. He thought that perhaps if he said ever and ever so many times that he wasn't afraid, he might actually make himself believe it. The trouble was that every time he said it, a little voice, a little truthful voice down inside, seemed to speak right up and tell him that he was afraid. Poor Chatterer! It hurt his pride to have to own to himself that he wasn't as brave as little Tommy Tit the Chickadee. His common sense told him that there was no reason in the world why he shouldn't be. Tommy Tit went every day and took food from the hand of Farmer Brown's boy. It seemed to Chatterer, and to Happy Jack the Gray Squirrel, and to Peter Rabbit, and to Sammy Jay and to Blacky the Crow, all of whom had seen him do it, as if it were the very bravest thing they ever had seen, and their respect for Tommy Tit grew wonderfully. But Tommy Tit himself didn't think it brave at all. No, sir, Tommy knew better. You see, he has a great deal of common sense under that little black cap he wears. "It may have been brave of me to do it the very first time," thought he to himself, when the others told him how brave they thought him. "But it isn't brave of me now, because I know that no harm is going to come to me from Farmer Brown's boy. There isn't any bravery about it, and it might be just the same way with Chatterer and all the other little forest and meadow people, if only they would think so and give Farmer Brown's boy half a chance." Chatterer was beginning to have some such thoughts himself, as he tried to make himself think that he wasn't afraid. He heard the door of Farmer Brown's house slam, and peeped out from the old stone wall. There was Farmer Brown's boy with a big fat hickory nut held out in the most tempting way. And Farmer Brown's boy was whistling the same gentle little whistle he had used when Chatterer was his prisoner, and he had brought good things for Chatterer to eat. Of course, Chatterer knew perfectly well that that whistle was a call for him, and that that big fat hickory nut was intended for him. Almost before he thought, he had left the old stone wall and was halfway over to Farmer Brown's boy. Then he stopped short. It seemed as if that little voice inside had fairly shouted in his ears, "I am afraid." It was true. He was afraid. He was right on the very point of turning to scurry back to the old stone wall when he heard another voice. This time it wasn't a voice inside. No, indeed. It was a voice from the top of one of the apple trees in the old orchard, and this is what it said: "Coward! Coward! Coward!" It was Sammy Jay speaking. Now, it is one thing to tell yourself that you are afraid, and it is quite another thing to be told by someone else that you are afraid. "No such thing! No such thing! I'm not afraid!" scolded Chatterer, and then to prove it, he suddenly raced forward, snatched the fat hickory nut from the hand of Farmer Brown's boy, and was back in the old stone wall. It was hard to tell which was the most surprised, Chatterer himself, Farmer Brown's boy, or Sammy Jay. "I did it! I did it! I did it!" boasted Chatterer. "You don't dare do it again, though," said Sammy Jay, in the most provoking and unpleasant way. "I do, too," snapped Chatterer, and he did it. And with the taking of that second fat nut from the hand of Farmer Brown's boy, the very last bit of fear of him left Chatterer, and he knew that Tommy Tit the Chickadee had been right all the time when he insisted that there was nothing to fear from Farmer Brown's boy. "Why," thought Chatterer, "if I had let him, he would have been my friend long ago." And so he would have. And this is all about Chatterer the Red Squirrel for now. Sammy Jay insists it is his turn now, so the next book will be about his adventures. End of Section 8. End of The Adventures of Chatterer the Red Squirrel by Thornton W. Burgess.